1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue Podcast Soundcheck. Monday show live. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hello and welcome to the Monday edition of the Royal Blue Podcast with me, Ian Kroll. It is the post-Chelsea show, and joining me live in the Royal Blue studio to talk all things Everton, we've got Joe Thomas, the return of Joe Thomas to the podcast. You were off all last week, to be fair, weren't you, Joe? So welcome back. How are things?
Yeah, I was off all the week before.
Ended
up with a bit of a funny week last week at the bank holidays and that. So
all good?
Yeah, all good. Glad to be back.
How was the trip to London itself? Obviously, we'll come on to the
long day.
The feet, but
yeah, just a long day. Very, very lucky to be able to go to these things and go to these games. And was travelling down and back with Everton fans. Had a bit of fun on the way down and on the way back, but not so much fun during the game. So we'll come on to that one.
We will come on to it. I've got to say that before on Friday's pod, it was kind of slated that the press food, the food in the Chelsea press room is really good, and Chris was going to tell us, Chris Beasley was going to tell us what he had, but obviously Chris was meant to be on today's show, but he's not, and I've jumped in for him. But what was it? Did you have anything nice? Any good food?
yeah.
Rated out of 10.
Rated out of 10. Yeah, well, because it was lunchtime kickoff, so most journalists are there eating probably about 10 o'clock in the morning. So it's a breakfast basically. Yeah. So it was. Chelsea's normally pretty high in terms of the standards, and it was good. So, you basically had a full English, or as much of a full English as you wanted, and plenty of pastries and things like that as well. And the standard was good sausages. Only problem was that it was wooden cutlery, but like the really thin wooden cutlery. Given the quality of the food, it was difficult.
Heart bleeds for you, Joe.
I know.
Heart bleeds.
What are they expecting in the press room for wooden cutlery? There, that's a bit extreme.
So but like I say, we really are lucky to be in the situations that we are in, and it was probably the only difficult moment of Saturday, as long as it was probably the first hour of the actual football match. So.
Absolutely. Well, we will come on to that, but also on today's show, completing the lineup, Gav Buckland. How are you, Gav?
Fine, thank you. Yeah. A few weeks since I've spoken Everton, apart from the Bayern Munich pod last week.
Which we put up last week, Yeah,
no, I'm fine. A big shout out, and Joe's just imagining there talking to Everton fans. Big shout to Bernie from the OCS club, I think, in Derby Lane, who looked after us on Friday. Big fan of the podcast. So we said I'd give him a mention. Came over and said, I recognise you. You're Gavin Buckland, aren't you? Thought, yeah. No, he did.
Any autographs or
any
selfies?
Autographs? No. And so I said I'd give him a mention. He was very, very complimentary about the podcast.
I'll give a mention to Chris, who I met as well. I won't quite say where and when last week, but yeah, just heard a voice behind me say it's always my voice that people recognise rather than my face. I think I've got quite a weird accent, haven't I? So like a weird kind of Shropshire, Merseyside hybrid of just a mess that stands out, I think, for people who listen to me, but always grateful for people who sort me, and also the lads in the on the train on the way back who were on the table opposite me and Chris as we were working away, and obviously several tinnies deep by this point. I could hear him whispering, I think that's the lad from the Echo. I think that's the lad from the Echo. Which I said, I can hear you, mate, it's okay. So
just out of interest, Joe, you said there was a few Everton fans on. Did you speak to them? What did he say about things were going?
Well, I think most people, probably similar to what you'd imagine, really. I think most people are grateful for how things have gone since Moyes came back. And really, I think where I find a difference of opinion now more is over specific players, what should be the ambition for the final games of the season and then going into the summer. I think we're lucky most people are aligned on the bigger aspects. It's now the kind of the finer points of which players and what type of mentality people want to see. So it's going to be really interesting. But specific players. And what I find really fascinating is that I'm not seeing a consistent view on specific players.
No.
Like I'll speak to one group of people that will say, they don't think this player should have a future at the club, but then the next people said that they should. So I think probably gives a little bit of an insight into the difficulties that someone like Moyes is trying to figure out at this present moment in time, where there aren't many easy decisions to be made.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I'm sorry, I don't know if
No,
it's interesting because even after Saturday, I heard a few people about, going on about Garner Gay, should we renew him next year or
shouldn't?
Yeah, absolutely. Because thought he was poor on Saturday. Doucoure's one, I think, where there's a 50-50 and it is interesting. And it shows what a difficult job Moyes has got, hasn't it, really, in terms, and whoever the transfer committee, whatever you would call it, is sorting that all out as well as buying new players.
You know what? It's a really interesting point. I mean, the contracts are huge in this pre-season because of how many are going to leave. I think for me, the most frustrating thing I've found, and it's not even anything to do with contracts, it's because everything is done for Everton now. Obviously, we want to try and finish as high up the table as possible, and we certainly don't want to finish 17th because of how that looks on the record. But I get the impression, and this is me as well, that fans just want this season now to be over so we can fast track to the summer and obviously continue on with the planning. I know that's not going to happen. We've got 4 games left and we've got a big, huge game on the 18th of May to say bye to Goodison Park. But I think we didn't want a relegation battle, a last day, second to last game type of scenario. But it's almost now where it's not an element of frustration, but it's almost like we want the season to be over and just move forward as quickly as possible. But I think I said this on Twitter or X over the weekend, it's perspective and patience. And I think we've all got to have a little bit of that as well, haven't we?
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
I wasn't recognised over the weekend, so I can't add to that part of the conversation. But anyway, we will move on. Today's agenda, we are going to react to Everton's 1-0 defeat at Stamford Bridge, as well as discuss and debate a few other things. As always, before we get going, give this video a thumbs up, drop us a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated, and as always, get your comments in. We are live, so get your comments and get your questions in. I'll put them to the lads. Joe, start with you. You were down in London for the 12:30 kickoff along with Chris. Obviously not the result that we wanted. Maybe we probably should have got. I don't know. We were probably poor in the first half, slightly better in the second half, certainly with changes. Just your initial reaction to the overall game?
Yeah, I thought it was a tough day, to be honest. And whilst Everton very nearly did come away with a draw, I didn't think they deserved one. Okay. I thought that Chelsea were comfortably the better side for the first hour. I thought really, and I thought Chelsea were comfortably the better side for the first hour. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't think there's any real shame in that from an Everton perspective. I think what we just saw was the limitations of this group of players and what Moyes has got to work with. Look, Chelsea are still a squad that is probably lesser than the sum of its parts, but it has some very, very expensive and some very, very talented parts. And I think that we know that, from a net spend perspective, Everton have, I think there's about a £900 million difference over the last 3 or 4 years, which is telling in one way. But, squad depth has not been a strength of Everton, and just having players of real quality is something Everton haven't had this season, really, apart from we've seen glimpses rather than sustained quality. When you compare that to that Chelsea lineup, there's just no comparison, is there? And they got the likes of Caicedo, Fernandes and Lavia are all, 60, 70, 80, £100 million players just there, as I said. I know Caicedo was right back, but, you don't throw the likes of Cole Palmer there, Nicolas Jackson, and there is no comparison. But I thought they made Everton look really poor. And whilst they perhaps didn't create lots of clear-cut chances, I thought they could easily have been 2 or 3-0 up at half-time. And I think that some of that was tactical. I think that they approached the game in a way that perhaps surprised Moyes and Everton a little bit. The way in which they kind of inverted their fullbacks, almost had their fullbacks playing as like additional centre midfielders, just meant they overwhelmed Everton's midfield. And then that kind of just exacerbated, intensified the problems that were always likely to happen elsewhere, like Madueke taking on Patterson and O'Brien on the right side of the defence, and a couple of other issues as well. So it's a difficult game to kind of read too much into it. Because on the one hand, it was a game that reminded us the desire, the determination, the energy, the resilience that has been so much a part of Everton's gone right under Moyes. That is only going to get us so far. They can only paper over the cracks in that squad so much. But then it does get you to a point where once they did hang on, they then somehow very nearly came away with a point that seemed unlikely for so long. So, positives and negatives coming away from it. I think my overriding takeaway was I was just glad to come away from it knowing it was a game that didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It wasn't a life or death. Remember coming, almost 12 months to the day, coming back from there last year when the 6-0 pummeling and when Everton were in a relegation battle and well into that winless league streak and just thinking unlike the last 3 Aprils, thank God there's nothing riding on this.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously probably an important factor to take into account, Gav, isn't it, from what Joe just said? But let's face it, it has been a hellish month of fixtures. We've literally faced the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. I know it's changed slightly throughout the month with points totals and stuff like that. But once that game, Stamford Bridge, finished on Saturday, Chelsea were in the top 5. So literally consecutively, Everton played from 1 to 5. But I mean, frustrating. But again, is it a positive frustration that we're coming away from a game against Chelsea, a team going for the Champions League, that, okay, we didn't play fantastically well, but we probably thought we got something from it?
I thought we should. Chelsea, I'd take Joe's point about, they've got a lot of good players, but they're not the sum of the parts, are they? And I felt, saying in the first half, we showed them a little bit too much respect, didn't we? It was a typical, and it's not necessarily, it's an observation, not criticism, a Moyes away setup and attitude at a big 6 club that goes back to his first spell in charge is keep it tight. Don't give them too much and just stay in the game for as long as possible. And invariably, when Moyes has done that in the past, as we've seen at Anfield in the derby, you end up getting beat 1-0. and because we haven't got enough quality up front. I think we scored 1 goal in 5 games from open play. And that I've seen that performance so many times by Moyes, both at Everton and West Ham, where you come away thinking, if he'd have just gone for it a little bit more. Bear in mind what you were saying, Joe. Like it's no game is meaningless because there's cash on the line, isn't it? Where you end up. But in terms of, for us, it's close to. And I would just like to have seen a little bit more of an attitude that we showed in the last half hour in the first half. I mean, I think he said afterwards that, the first half performance was possibly the worst we've played. I just thought we didn't compete. I take Joe's point in midfield. We were overrun more by tactics than poor performances by Garner Gay and James Garner, who actually, for all that, I didn't think did great on Saturday. And Beto, it's unusual for Moyes, isn't it, to call somebody else after the game?
He was very frustrated.
Yeah. And somebody was telling me yesterday that I think Brandwaite was having a go at Beto and Doucoure in the first half, on the pitch, see from the way end. And so there was I think there was that for us. We didn't hold the ball well and, pretty basic stuff. And I thought the goal we conceded, how many goals we've seen, how many goals have you seen scored like that this season? Not many, where the ball's played into the midfield, comes back and the centre halves are 20, 30 yards apart, aren't they? I mean, there's just Moyes, for all he loves his, his management is based on defensive stability. He will be going absolutely spare with that first goal.
What would you have done differently then? Obviously you made substitutions in the second half, which clearly had an impact on the game, and we look more of an attacking threat. Would you have approached the game differently in a more attacking sense? Because we've seen in the past when that does happen, when we set up to be a bit more, not gung-ho as such, but maybe have a go at these bigger teams. But look, just Joe mentioned it last season, 6-0 against Chelsea. I remember that game. We were so wide open, it was untrue.
Yeah. I think Joe Hart made a good point on Saturday, didn't he, on Match of the Days, when the ball was played and for Beto, got a bit of stick. There was no Everton playing around him. It happened 3 or 4 times in the first half.
We'll come on to that.
I think that, I don't think McNeil looks fit. I'm not sure whether I would have, people said, start McNeil. I don't think even when he is fit, he doesn't look fit. He's one of them players, isn't he? Joe, you've written this morning about Alcaraz having his been a bit of a problem selecting him about starting. I don't think that's helped. So in terms of what we had available, probably not a lot. Really, it was just the attitude and the way the team was set up. I think was
motivation as well, maybe.
Possibly. You were saying there at the start that the fans are just waiting to get this season over with. You suspect some of the players are as well, don't you?
So this is. We talked about this all last week, saying the season could just fizzle out. Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't, but that is a clear sign on Saturday.
Some players know that they've got maybe 2 or 3 games left of their Everton career, or quite a few, and that can sometimes sound to miss itself, really. So it's just the attitude and the way we were set up. I think which is typical Moyes. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but a lot of times just end up getting beat 1-0.
Is typical Moyes the way you say that a negative thing?
No, because I think he knows his limitations as a manager and the team that that he's in charge of. But I do think occasionally he is. And I've always been a big advocate of Moyes. Love the job he's done for Everton in the first spell. But I think there are occasions where you can accuse him of going away from home against teams who, okay, are big teams, but not necessarily the powers that they were, and not really going for it as much as what you would expect, and a lot of the time just paying the price for that. If you have a look, you have a look at Moyes, and this is typical, and this goes back to his first spell. All Moyes' managerial career, not many teams, either Everton or the team he's managing, the opposition score 3 goals in a game. It's always 0s, 1s and 2s, because we always stay in the game, and invariably sometimes that extra quality will kick in. But the type of manager he is, he always wants to stay in games. You play in the percentages, and that goes back to his first spell in charge. I think it's 12 games where nobody scored 3 in 11 games since the Spurs game, I think, isn't it? You have a look at his last 14 games in the first spell, nobody scored more than 3 in a game. So his tactic is just to stay in the game. And
with the tools that he's got,
and the danger is that if you try and do that away from home against a big club with good players, they've got the quality to close the game out, and that's what happened on Saturday.
I mean, we'll discuss some of the key incidents with Joe, but I've got a comment here. So the Blues say Chelsea aren't a team that you want to be wide open against. The recipe to beat them is counter-attack and set pieces. Now, the past couple of away games, we have kind of been good on the counter-attack, and it's been beneficial to us. No set pieces haven't been great.
I was going to say set pieces haven't been great. I thought, Joe, don't you think set pieces are absolutely woeful on there?
Yeah, deliveries anyway.
On Saturday. I mean, how many times did we hit the goalkeeper? And also as well, staying on. Can we tell Chimisi to stay on side?
Yeah, send them a message.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's just things like that, where actually, if this is your tactics, Dave, is like your first spell in charge, get your set pieces right, make them effective.
Okay, well, we'll come on to some of the stuff that you've just discussed there as well, Gav. But I mean, let's start, I think, with one of the key incidents in the game. I don't know what you think, because I haven't heard your thoughts. The Mykolenko clash with the Chelsea goalkeeper. I'm sorry, but that was just the most bizarre decision from the referee to give a free kick to Chelsea there. For me, it was a clear penalty.
Yeah, I disagree.
Yeah?
Yeah, I disagree.
He completely comes out and poleaxes Mykolenko.
Gets the ball first.
It doesn't matter because Tarkowski won the ball against, what's his name? McAllister the other week, and we were told that he should have been sent off. It doesn't matter if he gets the ball.
Well, I mean, it does, because there's a difference between being reckless and standing your ground, isn't there? And there's a difference between the way in which different players go in for the ball, isn't there? And I just think with that one, the keeper's got every right to go for it. Mykolenko's got every right to challenge him. There's no high arms, there's no high legs or knees or anything like that to coming together after the ball. It looks clumsy, and Sanchez has put himself in a position where he could easily have had a big decision go against him, but I wasn't coming away from that thinking Everton had been particularly hard done by.
To give a free kick to Chelsea?
Well, I mean, if you're not going to give a penalty, then your alternative reading is that Mykolenko's collided with Sanchez after he's won the ball.
Or it's just a 50-50 coming together and you do a drop ball.
Well, you could do that if you want, mate. I've got a feeling what I'm saying is not going through. So
no, I just found it, after watching it back, I thought it was a penalty the first time I saw it, and I'm watching it back. I mean, what did you think?
I've only seen it once. It was noticeable. I didn't think they showed it on Match of the Day.
It just wasn't brought up.
Yeah, because when that happens, that normally means that actually they think there's nothing to see here, in my experience. And they showed the better one
under the carpet. That was
the better one on Match of the Day shown. But I think it was pushed under the carpet because there's nothing to see here, as they say. It was, well, I recollect of it. It was just one of them things coming together, but certainly doesn't.
The most interesting thing about that incident wasn't the incident itself; it was what happened after the incident. Whilst Mykolenko was getting treatment, Everton were already 1-0 down at this point, and it was clear that I'm not sure how hurt Sanchez was, but it was clear that there was going to be a stoppage in that game. The press seats at Stamford Bridge are right next to the dugouts, right? But you could see everything. All the players come to the dugout to get their instructions, and you could just see Moyes, he's probably got a choice. He either goes to Pickford, if he blames Pickford for the goal, or he goes to Beto, and he went to Beto, and he spent 45 seconds a minute with Beto, and just again you could just see him just kind of talking him through and just being unhappy. Yeah. You got Pickford also kind of like from a bit further afield, clearly trying to state his case to say it's not his fault. Kind of touched on tactics there the other day. I'm not really sure what the best approach for that game was the other day. I kind of, and with the benefit of hindsight, I kind of feel like that was just a game that was just destined to go against Everton. Something just seemed off. And I haven't got an explanation for that. I'm dealing in the smoke signals or whatever, but the whole game, you can tell obviously Moyes has made changes that he doesn't really want to make. He's been forced. Obviously, Tarkowski coming out. It's a bad week for Everton, really. Tarkowski... we only obviously got confirmation this at the end of it, but wrote a story earlier in the week about how Tarkowski hadn't returned to training. I think that's really hit Moyes in the squad, because I think Moyes is nervous about this summer because he knows he's got a lot to do. And he's got 2 transitions to manage. One is the squad, because there's going to be a lot of change in the squad. And 2 is to move to the new stadium, which, whilst he thinks might be an easier transition than, say, other clubs have managed, say West Ham going into their new stadium, Tottenham into theirs, he thinks that there's probably more to suggest this might be easier for Everton to have a better start in the new stadium. But he is nervous about that impact and managing expectations and how different forces are going to be at play for the players in those key games at the start of next season. One thing that he is building his idea of Everton's future around is the core that he sees as crucial is Pickford, Branthwaite, Tarkowski. That's what he sees. That triangle as the basis of everything that he wants to build Everton around. That's not to say that Branthwaite will definitely stay, but he will fight to keep Branthwaite. He wants to keep Branthwaite because he knows how important he is. And he sees Tarkowski as someone that's obviously very consistent, both in terms of his performances and his ability and his leadership. And we all know how good Pickford is. Now, all of a sudden, he's gone from 7 days, what are we on Monday now? 9 days ago, he's there. I've got that solid base. Everything else I've got to figure out, but I've got that to work from. And that basis is one that's kept amongst the most clean sheets in the Premier League in the last 2 consecutive seasons. All of a sudden, Tarkowski's just been pulled, he's had his feet pulled from him. Player that's played, 111 consecutive games, never gets injured. Well, all of a sudden, he's got a hamstring injury that looks like it's going to rule him out for several months, potentially take him out of pre-season. Obviously going to have an impact in the start of next season. And bearing in mind that Tarkowski is 32, has a game that's built on his physicality, built on his strength, built on his durability, big hamstring injury is something that makes you worry. And all of a sudden, it's a big issue looking at the summer, because he's gone from potentially having to look at maybe if Michael Keane goes, I might need to find another 4th choice centre-back to try and maybe get a youngster in that I think can grow into it or whatever. Well, now all of a sudden, he's got a big question mark over a key bit, because nobody will know, and we'll hope that Tarkowski comes from this strong and really well. No one really knows how he's going to emerge from it at the start of next season. So, I think that shook Everton last week, and I think that it just throughout that game, as I say, we're so close to the touchline. Just Moyes was just on the touchline for the whole game. Instructions to O'Brien, instructions to Patson, instructions to Beto, instructions to anyone that come near him, kind of like arguing with the 4th official, Beto getting manhandled, so he's having to go at Colwell or Cucurella or things like that. Just, the whole, it just felt like there was something off about the whole day, and I just kind of come away from it. I know it's really simplistic, and I want to try and explain things away in grand things about players and tactics and stats and stuff like that, but it just felt like it was always going to be a difficult day for Everton, and just we kind of saw that in that mini inquest, because it wasn't the only one that was going on. So whilst Mikalenko's down injured, you could just see everyone big, and there was players were bickering with each other. You mentioned Doucoure and Branthwaite earlier. They're doing it in the second half again over the placement of headers and things like that. It just felt like a bad day at the office for Everton the other day.
Yeah, I mean, you could see there was a clear frustration from Moyes. I mean, you can jump in on there, Gav, but just going to the goal, I'm not sitting on the fence with this one little bit. Obviously, Moyes called out Beto. Even Pickford has done it as well to an extent, and not called him out to a point where you've had a goal, but obviously said he needs to do better. He definitely does need to do better. I think it's not one of them where it's a one touch and he loses the ball. He's got the ball for a good 3 or 4 seconds. You mentioned there was no one around him. I think Doucoure was close to him. It could have been an easy...
I was just talking generally about the first half, by the way.
He needs to do better. However, that is not Beto's strength. I don't know why Pickford's playing that ball to him in the first place anyway. But quite clearly, they're trying to work on Beto to improve, hold the ball up, because you can't just play the balls into channels and on the shoulder of the last defender every single time. No. There has got to be an element of a striker holding the ball up. That goes without saying. I just think he's clearly not there yet, and it was a bit of a crazy pass to make to Beto.
The way the team was set up behind him, there was a big gap, wasn't it, between the midfield and the two centre halves, and there was a big gap between the two centre halves, wasn't there? And you just don't see goals scored like that, and don't see a goal scored like, where it's David Moyes managing the team. And so it wasn't just like Beto's fault. I think there was a few other people, the way we were set up for that situation was wrong.
The two holding midfielders were not there.
They're not there, yeah.
It was crazy when you look back.
The two centre halves are like sort of 25 yards apart. So Nicolas Jackson get the ball, and there's nobody by him. It's like literally, he's in acres of space. And so I just thought it was a bad goal to concede, for lots of reasons, not just down to Beto. I think the Tarkowski thing is quite interesting, isn't it? Because I'm not sure I've been critical of Tarkowski. I think he's been in and out this season. If you take Tarkowski out of that team, who's the natural on-pitch leader? No, and you say Pickford is, but he's the goalkeeper. But in terms of your 10 outfield players, is there a natural leader? There's no Coleman. You're looking around and thinking,
who's the voice?
Who's sorting this out? Maybe there's no coincidence what you were saying, that there was like a little bit of back chat between the players on Saturday, because there's nobody really to pull them all together. Maybe like you say, it was a bit strange. Maybe that was the reason. The Tarkowski thing also as well. Has he got a year left on his contract? Mm-hmm. So it'd be interesting to see what happened with his contract as well. If he goes into next season and doesn't play for 3 months and his contract's due up at the end of the season, that might, whether that gets renewed or not, his injury situation might play into that. I think he as much as being critical of him, I thought Tarkowski took a hell of a lot of, his absence took a hell of a lot of leadership on the pitch away from us, and that was reflected, I think, in some of the players' attitudes and seeing some of the stuff that Moyes said afterwards, I think. So, and it's if Coleman on the bench, I didn't see the bench on Saturday. Was Coleman
he was on the bench, yeah.
Yeah. Makes you wonder whether you get Coleman on the pitch if Tarkowski's absence.
I think
just to give it a bit of direction.
If you look at how Coleman's season's unfolded, it's when he's played, he's often missed games after. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if it's about protecting him to make sure that he can start when the games are good as him.
Yeah. It just put a mirror, didn't it, to the team, and it set up that actually, if you take Tarkowski out and Coleman, the leadership that you want is not there, isn't it, really?
I mean, Joe touched on it there. There was a lot of bickering, back and forth. You obviously clearly need that person, that leader on the pitch to just tell everyone, just shut up and just get on with it and just do your job. And maybe that wasn't the case on Saturday.
Yeah, maybe a bit rudderless.
Yeah, I also think it was a bad personnel matchup as well. Like, I know we've both said that Chelsea aren't the sum of their parts, but when we look at Everton going up against, say, like one of the top 6 clubs, one of the strengths they normally have is their physicality.
Yeah.
And Chelsea are probably one of the more physical sides consistently through their side. That iteration of the Chelsea side that they played the other day, you're not getting much change out of Chalobah, Colwell. You got Caicedo at right back, Lavia. It's a big, strong side, that, isn't it? Yeah. Where you look at the problems that Beto and Doucoure collectively cause. Well, look against Liverpool over the 2 games this season, and in some of the other matches as well, it becomes a little bit harder for them to do so against a team like that. So that's also problematic. But
it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Really, the psychology of the team. Once Tarkowski goes, because Moyes has always wanted the big, strong centre half, hasn't he? Being a leader. You were saying about that triangle. That's what he had the first time. 2 centre halves and goalkeeper of Howard, Lescott and Jagielka, and then Distan and Jagielka. That saw him through about 6 years. Moyes, his best teams, and I think that we all saying get Branthwaite and O'Brien as the future. They're really, relatively young and inexperienced, aren't they? To ask them to form a centre half partnership. But O'Brien's only played half a season and not even at centre half, and Branthwaite is experienced, but not hugely experienced, where you're a leader, where you've got the confidence to, assert yourself. Though from what I heard he might have done now on Saturday, that's quite a young partnership. It sounds great on paper, two young lads and they've got something about them, but in reality, in terms of centre-half partnerships in the Premier League, you've got there's a bit of a risk if you've got two relatively young centre-halves in the same team, because you're competing against, you want experience there and leadership, and Moyes always wants that. And so it'd be interesting to see whether Tarkowski's injury is maybe, this is why I might be a bit annoyed about it, is changing some of his recruitment plans in the summer, where his priority might be a leader who's a central defender, because that's what he wants. And if Tarkowski's not there, as you saw on Saturday, then we struggle a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think with O'Brien and Branthwaite, it's the first time they've played together, isn't it?
I thought Branthwaite played well on Saturday.
I think Joe's right. I think it's a big issue. Tarkowski, not going to be playing for the remainder of the season, and it's a huge blow if he's going to miss pre-season as well, because we know how that affected him at the start of this season. He was clearly injured, or certainly not 100% fit, and that affected his form. Are you confident, Joe, that O'Brien and Branthwaite, obviously both of them stay, that they can form a partnership? Because I've just said it there, it's the first game. Maybe we're being a little bit too harsh on it. We were playing against a team going for the Champions League football.
Yeah, I think there are so many ways where I think Saturday may well have just been destined to have just been a bad day at the office, and that's another one. Look, it's the first time O'Brien's played at centre-back in the Premier League. Or started a game at centre-back in the Premier League in his career. So, I mean, that's it. It's a new partnership for him and Branthwaite. It's also, like Patterson struggled, but he's also up against O'Brien playing in a new position, in a new partnership as well. So there are lots of, they might seem like small changes, but you can understand why they'd have quite a significant effect on the players. The only way to find out about how well they can potentially do is to persevere and play them for a run of games and see how they develop. And I'm up for that at this stage in the season. I'm up for kind of trying to see what certain players can do and explore options that are in the squad before they go into the summer. But part of that has to be an acceptance from us, of those of us watching, that it will require a bit of patience, because there will be teething problems. And I thought there were teething problems at the weekend, and as I say, maybe there was a degree of inevitability about that. Branthwaite and O'Brien did okay, but I wasn't blown away by either their performance. I know a lot of people are very positive about Branthwaite's display. Thought he was very good at what we know he's very good at. The defending his box, stopping the balls coming in, winning the headers, getting the blocks in, were very good. But I also thought that Nicolas Jackson was just given too much license in front of the two centre backs. I don't think either really had a plan to deal with him. And I probably would have liked to have seen the centre backs be a little bit more aggressive. And Everton were being overwhelmed so much in centre midfield. Maybe it would have helped if they'd one of them or both of them had taken the initiative, stepped up a little bit, and maybe started winning, trying to put themselves into that battle so they could win more of it and push Everton up the pitch. Yeah. Maybe that's a tactical thing, maybe it's a personal thing, maybe it's a relationship thing. As I say, most of these things are things that will probably get ironed out, and it's unfortunate they all unfolded against that opposition, in those circumstances. But that's what these games should be for now, just to try and work out what this squad can and can't do. And I know there'll be people that will say, well, Southampton, Ipswich are already relegated at home, so you're not going to learn a huge amount about them. I think we could certainly learn more about some of the attacking players like Alcaraz, where McNeil is, Chimiti, because you would hope that they'd be able to do some damage against those sides. And I think the away games to Fulham and Newcastle are actually really, really good tests for those players that are perhaps in that battle as to whether or not they're squad players or first team players next season. Because Fulham and Newcastle, obviously, both difficult away games, both still have something to play for to some extent. And both obviously having much better seasons than Everton, but those are the type of clubs that Moyes will be having in mind to try and play catch up with next season, try and make inroads into the gulf that has been this year. So I think that'll be good tests for the likes of Alcaraz, McNeil, Ndiaye, Chimiti. If you want to have another look at Breuer, Beto, those type of players. In defence, it's a little bit harder, but I think you just persevere with O'Brien and Branthwaite for the next 4 games. You see what you learn from it, and then at the end of it, you go, well, have I got faith in you've got a decent bank of evidence there to say whether or not if Tarkowski isn't fit, can't do a full pre-season, you think, oh, actually, I can have confidence in those two, or not, and then you have to try and address it another way. So
yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because prior to the starting lineup coming out, there was a lot of debate whether Michael Keane was going to come in and just keep O'Brien on the right. I wouldn't have been too fussed if Michael Keane had come in, just purely for the fact that the game's meaningless anyway. It doesn't really matter. I know you say money and all that, but if Keane had come in and it had been a disaster, it wouldn't have been that much of a disaster, really. Well, my worry was that O'Brien goes straight in as a centre-back pairing with Branthwaite, and they have a disaster, and that like kind of stops them before they even get going. They obviously need time to form a partnership, and quite clearly Tarkowski and Branthwaite have had that time and have formed a fantastic partnership. Said time and time again that sometimes the partnership is better than the individual defenders.
It's in the sum of its parts.
Yeah, at times. But the point being now, it doesn't really matter. Tarkowski is not going to be here. We're going to have to deal with it. And you would like to think that Branthwaite and O'Brien are the two future Everton centre-backs, at least for the next 18 months, 2 years maybe. So maybe the Chelsea game and the next couple of games, because it's meaningless, these are the time to iron out mistakes and form that partnership. I think.
Yeah, I think there's a risk though at their age and experience in English football.
Would you rather do it now though than at the start of the season when you need points?
But you develop partnerships over time. You don't develop them over 3 games.
No, exactly.
There's 2 of them teams are playing in the last 4 games. You've got nothing left, have they? To play for, as it were. So I don't. This is the thing now: is how much you're going to learn in the next 4 games. I was thinking about say Patterson. Give him a run, see how he does, see whether he's up to it, whatever. He's been at the club 3.5 years. Well, if you've been at a club 3.5 years and somebody's asking that question of you, let's see what you like.
There's a couple of players like that, though. Schmitty's one, but they have suffered,
slightly different.
They have suffered injuries though as well.
Yeah, Patterson, but he's still been here 3.5 years and has been available for quite a lot of the time, hasn't he? I don't know, he's played 50 games for us, something like 50, 60 games. So he's played a lot of games. For us, he played a lot of games for us to still be in a position that says, do we know he's any good or not? Well, the likelihood is the 3.5 years, in my experience, then you're probably not going to make it, and you didn't see anything on Saturday to disprove that, did you really? Chimissy's a different kettle of fish. The more and more I see Chimissy, I don't like him to say, he seems like more like a lone thing, doesn't he? Possibly Chimissy.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. I'm looking at
again, bad game to judge him by.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know the game changed after the I know it feels like the game changed after the substitutions the other day. I don't think it was the substitutions that changed the game, because I don't really think McNeil or Schmidt offered a huge amount. Obviously, Young, he put a few good balls in from right back. I thought Alcaraz did very well off the bench, and I thought it took him 10 minutes to get into the game, and then he got into it, and I thought it was a really good performance from him. But I thought what changed that game for the last half an hour was Beto almost scoring. Beto, has that snapshot out of nowhere on the attack with Harrison.
A good chance.
And, forces a good save from Sanchez. And that Chelsea side is obviously a side that's in very, very good form. And, they're on a great run. But I think this has been a theme of their season, including during the good run. I think they are psychologically quite fragile. And I think they had that snapshot and they realised, oh, wait a minute, we are vulnerable here. And I think that Everton's growth into that game was almost less about anything that Everton were doing and more about the anxiety and the nerves that kind of started to spread through Stamford Bridge, both in the stands and amongst the players. I think that's what changed, and Everton tried to take advantage of it. They exploited it a little bit, created a few more chances. And, McNeil puts that one away, and it wasn't an easy one. He did, I think, given how he had to contort his body, he did quite well to get the shot off that he did. It was just a very, very good save from Sanchez, wasn't it? And the set pieces were awful. I couldn't quite understand why McNeil wasn't taking the corners. I know they weren't from his favoured side, so they were intended to be from the Everton left, so his would have been out swinging rather than in swinging, if that's a tactic. But I was a bit surprised, bearing in mind how poor they've been over the last 4 months, why Garner carried on taking the corners when McNeil was there on the pitch. But we'll have to wait and see.
I'll ask you about Alcaraz in a minute, but just Joe's mentioned set pieces. What are your thoughts on our set pieces? Because we've gone from a team who scores quite a lot of set pieces to a team who's dreadful at set pieces.
Woeful.
Yeah.
I mean, I was nearly kicking Italian, I think, on Saturday, when we had the couple near the end, didn't we? That went straight into the goalkeeper's arms and it just like flat.
What is it though? I mean, delivery, yes, obviously that is an issue, but we've obviously made a big thing about bringing Charlie Adam into the club as a set-piece coach as well.
You can give people stick, but ultimately you're relying on, like a lot of coaching on, you're relying on the players carrying out the instructions and doing it properly. And you can have the world's greatest set-piece coach, but if your midfielder 2 or 3 times puts the corner and straight to the goalkeeper, then there's not a lot you can do about that, is it really?
I think it's a real missed opportunity for both Harrison and Garner, because I think that both of them have had an opportunity there over the past 3 months or so to, for whatever we think about what they are doing and what they're not doing on the pitch during open play, if one of them had taken command of set pieces and got 2 or 3 assists because they were putting in devilish balls all the time, then it really probably would have notched them up a couple of points in the, Moyes' assessment as he's trying to make his decisions for the summer. If Harrison was delivering brilliant set pieces and all of a sudden he becomes indispensable, and the same with Garner, because we know how hard it is for that Everton side to score goals from open play, even though that has improved. And the fact that neither of them have done it is both to their detriment. I think it's both. I think it's a missed opportunity for the two of them.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, that, isn't it? Because we said a few months ago, whatever, there's probably 7 or 8 players or whatever who Moyes has got an opportunity between now and the end of the season to assess whether they're worth retaining, off this list of 12 or 13. And I'm just wondering what his opinions are collectively of that group of players based on what he's seen so far. From Harrison, from Broja, Alcaraz possibly. There's not many of them that you'd say that, they've done so good over the last couple of months. They need to stay. There's a few who've gone backwards really. And that'll make it an interesting summer. I mean, even Beto, who was probably going to go in January, but for Calvert-Lewin's injury, he's not done himself any favours, has he, over his last 7 or 8 games? It's all right learning about players, but what he's learned over the last few months is that those in that pocket of players, none of them really have done themselves any favours, as Joe was saying.
O'Brien's the one.
I think
and probably
he's slightly different, I would say.
O'Brien's proved himself that he can kind of handle himself in some format in the Premier League, and I think the other one's probably Idrissa Gueye. To those of us who've been watching, there might not have been questions, but I think he really has been impressive over the last few years.
Yes. I'm talking about who were leaving in the summer. O'Brien's obviously contracted, isn't he, for another couple of years, but the ones leaving in the summer, say, well, should we keep them or not? Well, actually, what you've seen over the last 5 or 6 weeks is actually not so sure about most of that group.
Well, I mean, Joe's written an article on the Liverpool Echo website about Alcaraz. He did have a difference. He made an impact on Saturday. Annoyingly, Moyes, obviously, I think there's a line in your piece here, Moyes has conceded that the clause in the deal or the contract has impacted on his decision-making with regards to that. I think he needed 9 starts for us to basically... If we made 9 starts, we would have had to have gone and bought him. Yeah. That's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? Because he's obviously come in, made an impact in the first couple of games on and off the bench. And obviously Moyes probably doesn't want to activate that clause for whatever reason. Doesn't think he's good enough, wants to keep his options open. Well, now the options are open, I guess. Are we going to negotiate a better fee for us, or are we just going to cut bait and let him go?
Yeah, well, I think Everton still have an option to do a deal. If they don't hold all the cards, but they still hold a lot of them, I think. So I don't think you can say he definitely doesn't want to sign him based on what's happened. When I asked Moyes about this, it was at the start of April when he'd made 4 starts, and there would have been about 8 games to go. So there are plenty of opportunity for him to potentially get to that 9, and he basically said, obviously it's 9 starts to trigger it. And it is starting to kind of play on his mind because... obviously, I think it's very clear that he's wanting to try and leave decisions, about players' futures, until he knows more about them. I don't think it's that kind of difficult to understand when you think that come the beginning of April, Everton were pretty much safe. So it became less about necessarily playing the best team at all times. Whether or not Alcaraz gets into his best team is a different matter, but against some opposition in some scenarios, he clearly would start in the first 11. So look, I mean, now that's gone. He can start every game for the rest of the season now and only get to 8. So, Moyes has a bit more freedom to play with him. Look, Moyes isn't 100% convinced by him. That is another factor. He's not sure on Alcaraz. But I think that whilst he's not sure, I think he's not sure in terms of he's not sure he's going to be like a world beater. I don't think he thinks he's for £12 million he might pick up a player that's going to end up being worth 60, 70, 80 million pounds. That doesn't mean to say that Moyes doesn't believe or that Alcaraz can't prove that he could be a very handy addition to that squad. I mean, from what I've seen of Alcaraz, I think about the game at Crystal Palace when he was excellent, scored a goal, set one for Beto.
Yeah.
I think about the game against Brentford when the squad was on its knees, got a useful point. I thought he played. He's playing a more central role, and I say central, like more of a central midfielder than an attacking midfield role in both of those games, and he was very, very good in them. I also look back at Wolves away when just Everton were really, really struggling for any authority in that game, and he came off the bench and had a big impact. James Garner got pushed out wide. Everton improved when Alcaraz went into the middle, and I thought they did the same again the other day, and I know he came on at the left, but he played in a very narrow left role, so it was more central. And I thought when Everton did get better, when there were more opportunities to exploit, that he was central to that. So I think for Alcaraz, Everton have got so much to do this summer, so much to do, that for probably £12 million or so, there is a player there that I think if they sign him for that price, I kind of see him as a low risk signing. Yeah. I see him as quite a savvy one, because I think that even if you're not completely sold on him, for £12 million, you pick up a player that, if he ends up being a squad player, then it definitely raises the level of Everton's squad next season. If you're in a situation where Alcaraz is on the bench, then your starting 11 is much better than I think it is. You're raising the standards in the squad, and I think that's something that needs to be done. You can't get a lot for that amount of money. So to be able to kind of start the summer with a relatively cheap, relatively low risk, a known quantity of a player that can do a job in the middle, but part of what Everton need to do is to be able to build a situation where they have multiple players that can step into the positions. I think we've all been probably a little bit underwhelmed by Alcaraz on the left of midfield over the course of this season, but we haven't seen much of him in a central attacking role. When we have, I think he's been positive. The way he carries the ball, the way he drives with the ball. Even if we end up in a situation where I'd still would like to see Ndiaye get a chance in that role. Well, how much stronger? How many times have we kind of all winced or exhaled or 70 minutes into a game when when a mid-table side against us has made a change, like, they've taken off someone like Ndiaye and they've brought on someone like Alcaraz, and we've gone, they got some strength in depth there. Well, that could be Everton next season. Yeah. They can do that deal early. It's one less thing to worry about. It's one more player in that squad. And I also think his attitude is good. Like, I think wrote this in my piece, like he feels like he's got a bit of dog in him, and he feels like an Everton player, got a bit of bite, a bit of fight. I'm not saying Everton should definitely sign him, but what I'm saying is I think that I really hope that Moyes gives him chances now over the next 4 games. I think that Alcaraz feels like a very Goodison player, and I hope he gets a chance to prove that he's got the quality to be a Bramley Moore player. If he doesn't take it, then that's on him. But
is he the number 10 now, or would you expect a completely different reshuffle?
I think he could be a really good number 10. But if he's the backup number 10, then fantastic. I mean, because for £12 million, what are you really getting anyway? So
who's he the backup number 10 to?
Well, like I just said, like it could be to Ndiaye, or it could be to another new sign or something like that. But one of Everton's big problems over recent years, and particularly this season, has been the lack of squad depth. The fact that you've probably got, most squads have 18, 19, 20 players where you think the manager could trust them. And Everton have probably been sitting there with 13, 14. Well, if you get to a situation where you've got Alcaraz as a squad player, the level of your squad has risen, compared to how it has been this season. And I think there's a relatively cheap way of doing that. Mm-hmm.
Got a comment here just on what we're talking about now. So Paul Roberts says, Alcaraz is a player who can find time and space and seems perfectly capable of a career at the top level. Can't see any downsides to buying him at the price suggested. Yeah,
and the price suggested is key, because if it was 20 million, you could understand why they go, I'm not sure, 20, 25. You look at the fees that Lindstrom and Breuer have written into their contracts, and you think, well, they've gone a long way from being able to suggest that they'd be worth parting with that amount of money for. But as I say, I don't know of many players that they'll be able to pick up for. Certainly in terms of either a creative outlet in midfield that you could say for £12 million you could get him and be confident that he would fit into that squad and at the very least be a useful asset off the bench.
What's the situation now then with the clause in this deal? So obviously, if he hit 9, then we would have been obliged to pay the 12 million. But now that we're not, is it just open to negotiation?
I think so. I think Everton still have options. I'm not quite sure the terms of them, but I basically think there's a deal to be done there for Everton if they want it. So, it's up to Alcaraz to show them to do it now. And obviously, he's spent a long time trying to find a home, so you'd hope that he'd be able to.
I'd agree with Joe. I mean, when you say number 10, I don't think he's a classic number 10, is he? But he's just hang around by the stake and play balls in around the
Probably
corner.
More so than Doucoure, though.
Yeah, he's a deeper line number 10 who move forward from midfield, isn't he? He's not somebody who'll just hang around.
Hold that place.
So he's not a classic number 10 as you would understand the role. If anything, he's a little bit of like just a general midfield player, isn't he?
Yeah, he's almost like a good halfway step, isn't he? From a side that almost wants to play with 3 centre midfielders, but Doucoure almost playing 1.5, doing the job of 1.5 players. If you want to move from that to a situation where you'd have a proper number 10, this is kind of like the in-between step. This is the progressive step, isn't it?
And on that basis and the fact that actually it's low risk, 12 million, you get your money back on them probably anyway. And there'd be positions where I think he might want to take a risk in terms of somebody who might look good, and but I know transfers are risky. I think this is a low risk one, and in terms of balance of the people you bring in the summer, you want a bit of balance between ones that you're taking a punt on and ones that actually think, I'm gonna like know what I'm getting here, and I think it'll be one that you get in just purely to provide balance to your purchases as much as anything else. And I'm all for it. And hopefully he has a good few games. He does appear to be like an Everton player. How would you view it? I like him. Yeah.
He just feels. I think I think fans like him, and I can see why they like him. And
I think as well. Don't disagree with anything that both of you have said, but he's got the experience of Premier League, which we know Moyes loves. I mean, he's just already integrated into the team. You know, although he won't be a new player, he will be a new player. But you know what, 12 million's not steal as such, but I think it's probably a good price.
If you think 12 million, we think of 12 million. It's a lot of money, isn't it? In the transfer market, though, it isn't. It's funny how the transfer market distorts the value of money, doesn't it? Really, and I think I'd take him. Hopefully, get him on the pitch for the last 3 or 4 games, and he's got a little bit of versatility as well, which I think always helps.
Okay, last couple of minutes of the podcast with Gavin Cunningham says, stop playing Ghana and Doucoure, give Alcaraz and Ada and Dye or McNeil a game central. We don't need 3 central defensive midfielders. When you say
Ghana, is that James Garner?
Yes, he spells it as James Garner.
Yeah. I thought he might have said Garner guy. Maybe a little bit lightweight. If you take Doucoure out and James Garner out.
Lightweight anyway, aren't we, on Saturday?
Yeah, but I think if Doucoure does give you a physical presence, doesn't he? Yeah.
Kevin Murphy says Moyes has done brilliant since coming in, but was a typical away fixture, and attacking was shocking.
Yeah, okay. It's a template that Moyes has always used at the big clubs, and more often than not, I think sometimes it's worthy of being a little bit more positive and trying to get a result and force the game.
A lot of positive comments about Alcaraz. Just go back to one comment with regards to Branthwaite, and this comes from the Dogs of Science. Branthwaite's had enough Premier League experience. Branthwaite's had enough Premier League experience now to be a leader. Give him a new contract and make him captain when Tarkowski is not playing. I mean, I guess we've talked about that, haven't we? Well, you spoke in depth about Branthwaite, and then, you know, if we're going to reject huge amounts of money for Branthwaite, he should be on a contract that reflects his status in the team.
One or 2 things has to happen this season. He's either sold or he gets a new contract, because you're in a situation where they've already turned down £50 million plus from him, but the deal that he's on is effectively the deal of a young player that is just broken into the side. I think you're in danger trying to have it both ways. If you want to pay him like a squad player, but turn down massive money for him, then you can understand why, say, for instance, the player might be a little bit frustrated at that. So hopefully, I think we'd all love him to be around next season. We'd all love him to be a big part of the future. He's got potential to do that. So fingers crossed it's a new contract, and get him down there for the long term, and captain of the future.
Fingers crossed. I mean, that for me, that I know Tarkowski's been a stalwart in the team and hugely consistent. But you would like to think that is the partnership moving forward, certainly in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, you just want to be able to kind of integrate O'Brien on the club's terms rather than be forced into it because of injuries and things like that. That's the hope, isn't it? So.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we'll finish off now. What's the mood? Are you up or down?
What, life in general or Everton?
Whichever, Gav, whatever you want to hit me with.
It's an interesting question.
I feel a little bit frustrated at the minute, but I shouldn't feel frustrated.
I think, obviously pleased that we're going to stay up and stayed up comfortably, and we don't have to fret over the last few games of Bramley Moore. That's a positive. I think Moyes has done well largely since he's come back. But, and it goes back to what I said before, I'd still like him to learn his lessons and just go for it a little bit more. And it's like, a lot of talk, isn't it, about the Premier League. Now, the top of the Premier League is nowhere near as good as it was when Moyes was here the first time.
Yeah.
And I see no reason why you would want to continue with that template away from home with the bigger clubs that you used 10, 15 years ago, because I don't think they're anywhere as good as what they were in his first time here. And that's what I'd like to see him just do a bit more about. And I think also as well, one thing I say about transfers another day is, we talk a lot about targets. Moyes only got a 2-year contract, hasn't he? So, and the mood music, what you hear, you speak to people, you hear things that actually if he just wanted to do the 2 years. And if that's the case, he's going to be buying players in two-year period, isn't he?
I'm not so sure about that. He doesn't want to be there for the long term. But I think he does. Look, it's clear that he loves the club, and I think what he wants to do is, I think he sees part of his job now as trying to set it up for for the future. So I do think that in a way that he perhaps couldn't have maybe had this faith in other people in the dugout. I do think that whatever Moyes does will also be with a view of leaving the club in a healthy position in mind. So
I get that, but it's still only on a 2-year deal, isn't he? And that causes problem over players' contracts and stuff. And so that's the other aspect of the summer. I think that's worth thinking about in terms of the players he goes for.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding what Joe's saying, is that Moyes, because he's obviously loves the club and is doing the best for the club, not for Moyes, but over his 2-year deal. But he's still the Everton manager, and he still lives and dies by his results, doesn't he? And I think that's another intriguing aspect of the summer about what our strategy is. In terms of that, it's
got to be a mixture of both. The recruitment, it's got to be with a view to players coming in and hitting the ground running and having an impact. But obviously, you have got to look to the future as well. I think we're going to be limited again in what we can do this summer. But I do think that he's got to have both in mind. I think the point where we are now on the table and how standards have dropped, I think you've got to bring in players who are going to raise those standards now.
Yeah, I think at the top of that, I certainly think the middle of the table is several layers higher than what it was when Moyes was here the first time. Places 7th to 14th, 15th in the Premier League are far, those clubs, I know which clubs are talking about here, are far higher than what it was when Moyes was here the first time. And they're the clubs that have improved this year and play good football as well, largely. So that's what we want to get ourselves into that group, don't we? Because I don't think we're near that at the moment. And then kick on from there. So there'll be lots of transfer talk during the summer. I'm just wondering what our strategy will be. That balance between, as what Joe was saying there, is Moyes wanting a 2-year strategy to get him through the 2 years, but also with an eye on beyond that. It's how we balance those two aspirations, isn't it, really?
Final thoughts. I mean, Gav said there's no threat. I guess it's a different type of threat for me, because you can see glaringly obvious where the problems lie and how things can be rectified, but we just can't do anything until the summer.
Yeah, I mean, you asked mood. Like, I'm positive. Like, I think we got through a really difficult month. I think part of the problem on Saturday was perhaps almost like we went into the game not actually knowing what we were trying to achieve. Couldn't work out whether we were trying to be hard to beat. Couldn't work out if we were trying to get more than a point. Couldn't work out what you really wanted from the game. Did you want to just look at new players in different positions and things like that? I think all that's gone now. I spent the morning speaking to the 1878s. You've got Ipswich this weekend. That's going to be their last display, and I think Goodison's going to look absolutely fantastic. And then obviously a couple of weeks after that, we got Southampton. Everton aren't in a relegation battle. I think there's a lot to look forward to. They've got the right manager in charge, and I think they're all set for a really positive summer. It's going to be a difficult summer. It's a complicated summer. Like, there's a lot of moving pieces. I'm not saying it's going to be easy for Moyes and that to get it all right, and they're going to be under a lot of pressure when moving to the new stadium. But more than anything, I haven't had 3 Aprils of sleepless nights and fretting over the future of the club on and off the pitch right now. I mean,
you couldn't look more relaxed.
This is bloody lovely, and I'm all here for it. And I think there's a lot to be excited about, even if performances, and we might see a few more of these as well, are a little bit, kind of leave a little bit to be desired. I do think there is value in having a look at some of the squad going into, and I think you need a bit of patience as a result of that. But I think there's a lot that we can all be proud of and excited for going future. So hopefully we can all make the most of that for the last month.
Fantastic way to sum it up, Joe. Thank you. Just a reminder that I'm going to be back on Wednesday with Conor O'Neill for a Wednesday edition of the Royal Blue podcast. And obviously we will be back Friday as well to preview Ipswich, second to last home game of the season. Really looking forward to that one, to be honest.
It's going to be special, I think.
I think so. That is all for today's show. Please remember to subscribe and hit the like button. Drop us some 5-star reviews on Apple and Spotify. Most importantly, enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your week. I've been Ian Kroll, joined by Joe Thomas and Gav Buckland. And this has been the Royal Blue Podcast.